Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squared for boxing news and views from around the internet. A lot of news and unanswered questions in the wake of Tyson Fury's unanimous decision win over Otto Wallin, which was an unexpected dogfight with Tyson Fury battling through two different cuts. It was two, not just the one big gash you could see, but one also over the same eye. It was over the eyelid, and he battled through to get a unanimous decision. But lots of things coming out of this, including criticism from Fury's father of the training camp, the setup. Also, what does the cut or cuts mean in terms of the rematch? Deontay Wilder, Andy Ruiz Jr., they have weighed in, as has Frank Warren. There's a number of newsmakers that have made some statements, so we'll crack into it. But let's start with the obvious, the cuts. So you can see here on screen, very, very nasty sort of cuts. That one over the eyelid, somewhat disguised during the fight because obviously blood was just streaming from the one that was over the right brow. But Fury, he has been in surgery, immediately taken there after the win over Otto Wallin, and he had confirmed to the PA news agency that he was fantastic. They did an absolutely fantastic job on it. He was taken to the University Medical Center of Southern Nevada immediately after the fight, and he says he's had 50 stitches in it. I have seen elsewhere 47. But the nastiness of these cuts, I mean, that one over the brow, a couple of inches long, very deep, and that one over the eyelid, that's a very delicate spot. And obviously that, there's not a lot there, but the one over the brow as well, it's going to take some time to heal. Bob Arum has said that he believes that it will take about 2 months for the cuts to heal, and then Tyson Fury would go into a training camp, and that would be ahead of a fight with Deontay Wilder on February the 22nd, 2020. And that date has been something that Arum has been quite wedded to, and obviously still thinks that it's very makeable for Tyson Fury. But the extent of those injuries to his, eyelid and also the brow area, it does make you wonder, is 2 months long enough before entering a camp? And obviously, if it wasn't, it could potentially delay the fight with Deontay Wilder. And let's bear in mind, Wilder has to get through a fight of his own, which will be in November, reportedly, against Luis Ortiz, yet to be officially confirmed when that fight will take place. But February the 22nd, 2020 does feel quite close given the severity of the injuries, and obviously 50-odd stitches. It wasn't just a scratch, very deep injury, and one that could take some time to heal. And remember, Tyson Fury's cousin Hughie Fury, he had a sort of similar cut to the one that Fury had over his eyelid, and that was opened up by Kubrat Pulev almost with the first punch when Fury fought Pulev in 2018. So they have to bear that in mind that, obviously some of these cuts and the areas that they're in could be prone to being opened up again, and potentially even more easily than it did the first time around. So, a cut and how people heal with how the injury heals, it's not an exact science. So for Bob Arum just to throw out a 2 months, well, we will have to wait and see on that. But Frank Warren, he has certainly sort of weighed in and sort of said there is the possibility, telling the BBC that if it doesn't heal well, the fight may have to be pushed back. Hopefully that will not be the case. It depends how it heals. If it's okay, it won't be a problem. And it's not just the fight, it's the training and the sparring. He has to be 100% right. And that's it, isn't it? It's not just about shooting for a date and making the date. If Fury wants to win that fight and be in the right condition for that fight and not to re-injure, re-aggravate that injury, open it up, sparring is obviously something where that could happen. And as we know, Fury likes to spar without headgear, so that is a risk in itself, especially now he's got these injuries, which could be opened up again. But moving on, Tyson Fury's father, John Fury, he made some comments on the BT box office broadcast that it was the worst he's seen Tyson Fury. He says, "I'm proud of how he has mauled his way through, but he has to be honest and say things are not right. For a man to be in that condition after 8 weeks in camp, it looked like he had nothing after round 2. His strength and power went tonight. He was very weak as a kitten from the first round. At 18 stone 1, I've warned him and warned him. He is a 19 stone fighter. If I had my way, the lot would be gone. If they keep that team, that'll be his career. There's no snap to the punches. He lost his shape. The power was not there. His feet were coming together. It was an untidy effort. His will to win is unprecedented, but he made hard work of it from the off. How does a man like Otto Wallin with limited ability get that close with a piercing jab? An injury like that could finish a career. He might need surgery on that. And those comments were made in the immediate aftermath of the fight, and we know Fury has since had plastic surgery work on him, give him about 50 stitches. So does he have a point here? Is Tyson Fury, that effort there, is that cause for concern? It's interesting, John Fury's take that he had looked like he had nothing after round 2, because I saw something a little bit different. My take on it was that the first couple of rounds, Tyson Fury was letting the fight come to him. To me, I sort of thought he looks like he wants some rounds. And with only 1.5 rounds under his belt from the Tom Schwarz fight, I always figured that there was going to be some rounds in this fight. And he didn't come out sort of like a bull out of the gate like he did to some extent against Tom Schwarz, and he really poured it on in the second round against Schwarz. But Otto Wallin was giving him something different. He was a southpaw. He was giving him movement, angles. He was actually a far more trickier prospect just to break down than Tom Schwarz, who was a far more stationary target, more easy to hit. So I didn't have any concerns after round 2. I thought Tyson Fury was easing his way into the fight. But it's interesting how people can see things a little bit differently. I mean, Fury was touching Otto Wallin up with jabs, but he wasn't really sort of doing too much in those opening rounds. And then obviously things turned on their head in the third round. The punch from Otto Wallin, opening uppercut, and that changed the way that Tyson Fury fought. He's basically said he couldn't see out of one eye, that he wanted to try stay close to Wallin if he could. He really did sort of start to make it a more of a brawl for a lot of those rounds than rather than keeping it at distance, because apparently, according to him, he couldn't see the punches. And I agree with John Fury, it was an untidy effort. He didn't look fantastic in there, but to some extent, in my view, you know, circumstances dictated that the way that he fought. And as I said in my post-fight review, I thought he did look a bit rattled in rounds 4 and 5 before starting to sort of settle down. And obviously he started taking over in the second half of the fight, dominated the second half of the fight. So, you know, this whole question about does Tyson Fury need a new trainer, a new setup, you know, is his weight in the mid-250s, is that his optimal weight at this point in his career? So Ben Davidson, he's weighed in on that to some extent, addressing John Fury's comments directly in a few different places. He said he's had a tough fight, which he clearly won after being cut terribly, not only 1 but 2 cuts. Sometimes you can't win, and that was his response on Twitter. But he also said, listen, if Tyson was a kitten, he wouldn't have been able to do 12 rounds like that. It was an engine and experience, strength and size, which was the difference there. Strength-wise, I was perfectly happy with it. The cut affected him a lot. He couldn't see out of it, but he had to make out like he could see out of it. That's why he made it a dogfight, closed the gap so he didn't have to be able to see the shots coming. He got the job done. John is Tyson's dad, so of course you have to respect him, but Tyson was fully prepared, and you can't do anything about sustaining a bad cut. Just because he's gone 12 rounds, it doesn't mean he's weak. If he was weak, he wouldn't have been able to do the 12 rounds there. We worked in training camp for it to be potentially a dogfight because we knew that we might have to go there. Otto had heart and bollocks and tried to close the gap, and luckily we had prepared Tyson in case it went that way, because that's what he needed. Ben Davidson's statements. And you can make an argument either way about this, depending on how you felt about that fight, the way that Fury fought, and how much stock you put into the injury and how it actually affected his performance. And for me, I do think it did affect his performance, but there were other things that Fury could have done better. Obviously, he was sort of circling onto Otto Wallin's left hand, his his power punch. Tyson Fury was walking into it at different points in the fight. But that question about should he get rid of Davidson and the rest of his camp? Well, I'm not sure that's going to serve anyone anything good at this point, say 6 months out or so, or whatever, from his next major fight, which would be against Deontay Wilder, potentially. I think at this point in his career, Tyson Fury has surrounded himself with the people he wants to be around. He respects Ben Davidson, and he enjoys his company, his training, and the comradeship that they have, and he believes in his young trainer, with Davidson being 26 years old. And if you actually listen to most of the instruction that Davidson gives in between rounds, it's pretty simple, explanatory, concise stuff, telling Tyson Fury that he needs to do. He doesn't overcomplicate things. And I think that Fury, between rounds, he doesn't need to be peppered with all sorts of stuff that is going to confuse him. He knows what he needs to do in there. He just needs to be reminded of it. And I think Davidson's instruction, for the most part, is actually pretty decent. But I guess people have different views on that. In respect of Tyson Fury's weight, well, you have to say that against Tom Schwarz at 263, he looked pretty good. But the opponent in that was an orthodox fighter who clearly came to fall down and didn't want to go any more than a couple of rounds. Otto Wallin came to fight. He was a southpaw. Styles make fights, performances make fights, and Otto Wallin performed way better than Tom Schwarz. So I don't know if it's a like for like, and the whole strength thing. Tyson Fury's not a massive puncher anyway. Why is John Fury implying that he is? Otto Wallin, he looked like he could have gone down a number of times, especially from about round 7, 8, 9, 10, but he didn't. He managed to hold his feet, he managed to survive the onslaughts, and with Fury not being a massive puncher, that wasn't exactly a massive shock either. I don't think many of us were thinking that Tyson Fury was just going to KO him with one punch. But make of it what you will. I mean, obviously John Fury, his father, has some concerns, and heading into potentially the biggest fight of his career next year in 2020 against Deontay Wilder, well, potentially against Deontay Wilder, I'm sure he didn't like everything that he saw, but, you have to temper some of the expectations with the injury and how that affected his performance. And Ben Davidson did explain it did affect his performance, and Fury has admitted much as well. And I'm far from being a Tyson Fury fanboy, but it doesn't take a rocket scientist to see that the cut had an impact, especially immediately after, in the first few rounds after. And the way that he fought, he looked rattled, but he did rally, and obviously he started to dominate the fight. And the performance and the way that it played out has led some people to say that Fury was exposed badly. And I don't necessarily agree with that, because I think if you took the injury away, if that hadn't have happened, we may have seen a completely different fight. It didn't take away from the fact that Otto Wallin came to fight, and he would have been working his game plan, which we did see, which he was trying to work Tyson Fury to the body, trying to hit a big area of Fury that, it's harder to dodge out of the way as it is for his head. But Otto Wallin came with a good game plan. Ultimately, that left hand did cause the injury, and it changed the course of the fight, and actually for the better, because I think we would have seen a much duller fight had it sort of kept going rounds without that drama of the cuts, because that obviously had held our suspense as fans and had us thinking, what's going to happen here? Could this be stopped at any moment? And in the 6th round, when the doctor came to the apron, I thought maybe this could be it. And there has been some who've said, look, tens of millions of dollars were on the line. They weren't going to take that away from Fury, whereas if it had been Wallin who was cut, it probably would have been called off. And after all, it is boxing, and I probably do agree that probably would have happened. But was that the best version of Tyson Fury? Well, clearly not. He sort of ended up brawling. He did lose his shape, like John Fury said, but circumstances, to some extent, with the injury, dictated that he changed the way that he fought to some extent. He said he could only fight out of the one eye effectively, or see out of that one eye, I should say. But would he have been any better if the injury hadn't have happened? Well, maybe he would have been a little bit flat. Maybe the criticism would have come anyway. But certainly the likes of Andy Ruiz Jr. and Deontay Wilder have sort of been weighing in. Ruiz Jr. cheekily on Twitter saying after that performance, there's no way he beats me with one hand tied behind his back, which is obviously something that Tyson Fury had said. And some of that sort of rhetoric is always a bit silly. But Deontay Wilder's going a little bit further. He has been quoted in the Sun newspaper as saying, I cannot wait. Oh my God, he didn't even have the best of me. We had the best of Tyson Fury. And that's the thing. I think, with that first fight, I thought it was the other way around. It was the best Deontay Wilder and Tyson Fury 6 months into a comeback. He says, I keep telling Fury himself, if you look deep in his whole situation, the mental health, the story they sold and still selling, that's the only thing he can hold on to tight and claim to. There's nothing else. I can't wait for this fight. The rematch is going to be so much different because I've been in there. For 1 and for 2, I'm going to be at my best, at my most healthiest. He goes on to say, Otto Wallin put up a good fight. I was most impressed with Wallin when he cut Fury open. When he cut a guy open with that deep of a cut, 2 inches long or longer, he even at one time tried to grab the boy eye and tried to pull it out. I thought, there you go. That's what you got to do. Put him in a headlock and put the sweat up in the eye. I can't wait. Bad intentions, bad blood. He's going to need more than the gypsy voodoo doll, more than the gypsy magic when he gets in the ring with me. It's definitely going to be a short night. I'm going to make sure of it. Deontay Wilder's statements. And I think certainly people have been looking at this potential rematch now with a slightly different focus as a result of this fight, in which Tyson Fury fought a very different fight than he did to, say, Tom Schwartz, but even to Deontay Wilder. That was a very different sort of performance. The style was different, but you also have to take into consideration Deontay Wilder is not a southpaw fighter. He's not going to be producing some of the same angles. He's not going to be nailing Tyson Fury with a straight left in the same manner as Wallin did. And I was thinking about this. Imagine if that was Luis Ortiz in there fighting Tyson Fury, and he sort of obviously had the same sort of issues that he did with Wallin, who touched him up a number of times. Could have been a very hard fight for Fury and a potential loss had that been Luis Ortiz. Obviously, Luis Ortiz is a much bigger puncher than Otto Wallin. But, he was never going to be facing Ortiz with a Wilder rematch in the offing, with Ortiz set to face Wilder. But I do think some of the reaction and some of the speculation about how a rematch may play out, to some extent, it is justified, because it wasn't a fantastic performance by Tyson Fury. But some of the terms of, how it played out with the injury dictated it was a different type of fight. So that has led people to go, well, hang on, Tyson Fury saying he's the best in the world. That looked far from the best in the world type of performance. How was Deontay Wilder going to do in there? And I think the thing for me, and I sort of talked about this in my post-fight, was I think, we have to have some questions about Tyson Fury and how he starts to fatigue in the later rounds, how he can start to be hit a little bit more. Is the concentration, is he able to hold off someone like Deontay Wilder for the full 12? Wilder caught him in the 12th and knocked him down heavily. Wilder hurt Fury in the 12th. And, so that's more my concern rather than sort of the question of was he exposed or can he win the rematch? Because I think if Tyson Fury boxes how Tyson Fury boxed in the first fight, and if he can sort of add a bit more, which I think we have seen him say in the Schwartz fight, looked very slick, looked very efficient. And that's the thing, people only remember your last fight, your last performance. And if they're only judging it off this one fight against Wallin, they could go, well, Deontay Wilder's going to win the rematch. But I think, you have to take different factors into consideration. Styles make fights, performances make fights, and Fury, he may have been a little flat in there. He may have opted to do things a bit differently because of the injury, but he still did rack up the rounds and got the job done. He showed heart and determination. I wouldn't be writing him off at this point. Is some of the talk, that was he was going to easily outbox Deontay Wilder for the rematch, was that maybe a bit overblown by some fans? Well, yeah, maybe it was. Maybe this is just sort of keeping expectations in check. Maybe people will now think, yeah, it's more of a 50-50 prospect, or some will even start leaning towards Deontay Wilder, and I completely understand that. I still think these two fighting off Wilder and Fury, it's going to be an incredibly competitive rematch. And I guess the last thing I wanted to touch on was Otto Wallin. Where do we sort of rate him? Where do we rank him now? How much credit should he get? The injury, it did change the fight, but he caused the injury, and he put up a very competitive effort, especially in those first 6 rounds. He fought well, better than most expected. I had one comment to say that Wallin is a top 10 fighter now, and that he was before that. And I think, yeah, look, that's just maybe taking things a bit too far. In the end of the day, he still lost a majority of the rounds, and quite a few of those rounds, especially in the second half of the fight, he was really sort of, battered by Fury, who dominated a lot of those rounds. And remember, if you step back and look at it, that was a guy who was saying he only had one eye. He, had those couple of cuts, and he claimed he couldn't see out of that eye, but he still managed to rack up quite a few rounds rather easily against Wallin. And, Wallin still lost. We have to keep it in perspective. Wallin didn't win that fight, so no way can I put him in the top 10 or near it. Otto Wallin still needs to do more in the division to make his way and prove that he is towards the top end of the division. I think after that, we can safely say he's somewhere around top 30, but he needs to do more, and he's got to actually get the job done and get some wins. Sure, he gets a lot of credit out of that, but let's not go over the top here. He's a good heavyweight. I said ahead of the fight he was a good heavyweight, but unproven. And he proved a lot in that fight, but he still didn't get the job done. So his profile goes up, his stock goes up with a lot of fans, but he's still got to do a lot more. What do you make of it all? Drop a comment, loud and often. Hit like, hit subscribe, follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.